One.
Welcome, everyone, to the Less is More Sports podcast. We've been gone for a couple weeks because I've been in the woods up in North Carolina, exploring the area. But now I'm back and I'm ready to talk about brackets, Les, because just as I was leaving town, those came in, and I cannot wait to break down. I haven't had a chance to check much, but I cannot wait to break down this exciting matchup we've got going on between between Alabama and Duke in the Final Four. I mean, I know that's what's happening, right?
Might be a
Right?
little, might be a little off.
But surely to God, on the other side, we've at least got like Texas and Kansas round three, right?
No, I don't think they made it.
Well, then who did?
Well, it looks like the college basketball powerhouses, FAU, San Diego State, Miami, and UConn have made the Final Four.
Huh. I guess in the woods I slipped into another dimension. Of course, we play that for a bit, but man, March has absolutely lived up to its title this year. This has been pure madness, and we really have been on a hiatus for a bit, so we've got a lot of topics to talk about. We've got a lot of ammo to fire off, so we're just gonna dig right in with Les. He's got a take on one of his favorite teams. So Les, you have the floor, buddy. We're gonna get into it. This is gonna be fun. Let's start this thing off right. Hit it.
So, but while we start off right, we're going to start this thing off right. First of all, congratulations to FAU, San Diego State, UConn, and Miami for making the Final Four. Even though I'm still hot about that Texas-Miami game, that is neither here nor there. But my opening segment and being a Duke fan and the host of a social media and sports podcast, I think it's only fair that I take this opening statement. Opening weekend, we saw both spectrums of Duke's social media presence in college basketball. The first side of the spectrum, you have what I like to call the Duke haters. What's the saying I've been seeing a lot? Duke loses, America wins. Those who follow me on social media probably got an entertaining look at the back and forth debate between me and the host of Wake Up 502, Rashawn Myers. Also, Rob Doster of the Field of 68 kept tweeting about Kyle Filipowski flopping, even though you could take one look at his face and tell that's not true. But the thing I was prepared to happen, and we even saw it a little bit, if Duke, and this would have been a big if, were to have come back and beaten Tennessee, every social media Duke hater and their mother would have pointed fingers where Jeremy Roach should, I'm admitting this, should have picked up his fifth foul, but instead it was switched to Tyrese Proctor. My issue was, it's not that it wasn't the wrong call, because it was. My issue is, look, I get it. Tennessee is a physical team, and the refs let them be physical. That is fine. But if you let one team play physical, you have to let the other team respond. And they did it. That's like officiating a boxing match and letting one boxer throw haymakers and another only allowed to play defense. That's not right. So for me, it's hypocritical for you all to get mad at one team for getting a favorable call when the other team got more. But on the other hand, and Matt and I talked about this off camera, is the other end of the spectrum. The spoiled Duke fans on social media. Yes, I'm calling you all out too. The fact that the question of whether this season was a success or not, the fact that that was even asked is absolutely ridiculous. First of all, at surface value, first-year head coach, 11 new players, 27 wins, and an ACC tournament title. But taking a deeper look, a blown call away from the share of the ACC regular season crown, undefeated at home for the first time since 2014, and here's the big one, Matt, 19-1 with a healthy team. That's the big one. Pretty good. It's safe to say that year one of the Shire era has given me nothing but optimism about the future. And I'm hearing rumors of who all could be coming back even after Tyrese Proctor decided to return. That was the big story today. And let me tell you, if some of these other dominoes start to fall into place, Duke will be an instant title contender in 2024. But Now to get Matt involved in the rest of the show, here are some of the social media narratives we've been hearing during the tournament.
Oh, that's fine. Just keep talking about Duke. I'll just sit here and smile.
Hey, you're doing a great job.
I'm trying not to laugh because I know I have this smile on my face, and it's like I'm not smiling at your pain. I'm just thinking about all the crappy Big Ten basketball I sat through where I just watched teams pummel the hell out of each other, and I'm like, Les, did you not watch that much Big Ten basketball? And then I'm like, of course he didn't, because Big Ten basketball is hellish and boring during January.
Well, speaking of Big Ten basketball, which plays perfectly into our first narrative, is Fairleigh Dickinson over Purdue the biggest upset in tournament history?
I'm gonna say yes, because people were comparing this to UMBC, and it's like when you take a step back, it's not really that comparable. We're talking about a team. UMBC was a conference champion, no question, who was playing a banged up Virginia team and just played their best game of the year. Fairleigh Dickinson didn't even get in the tournament on their own merit, I would say. They got in because Merrimack is doing the Bellarmine thing and they're not eligible to get in. They were 363rd in Ken Palm. I don't even think UMBC was that. I want to say they were in the 200s and were a little bit even underseeded. And I mean, the school doesn't have a band. The school played in the first four, something else UMBC didn't do. They had already played a game.
Hold on, pause. Before you continue, FDU doesn't even have a band?
No. The group of people you saw.
IUS has a band.
I know, but the group of people you saw in Dayton performing for them and Columbus were members of the University of Dayton school band who had stepped in to be the band for Fairleigh Dickinson. The players on Fairleigh Dickinson had not even heard their own fight song until like they upset Purdue in the first round of the NCAA tournament. That is what I'm talking about when I say that March is absolutely magic. Because these kids who have played in a gym that's smaller than the one here where I live in Indiana, smaller, I'm not kidding. The college gym is smaller than my local high school gym. Heard their fight song for the first time, beating one of the number one seeds for the second time ever. So I think that's a pretty big upset. And like I said, these guys were not highly ranked. They weren't even UMBC level. They came out of nowhere and just frustrated Purdue every chance they got. They were like, all right, Zach Edey can get his, but we're going to make a number two step up. Zach Edey can be Batman all he wants, but we're going to go Joker family, and he doesn't have a Robin, and it showed. Because when Purdue got into high pressure situations, they basically just could not convert. They ran weird plays. I mean, corner three after corner three for Fletcher Lawyer is not a great sustainable way to win a ball game. So yeah, I mean, that was the greatest upset I had ever seen. A team, the shortest team in the NCAA tournament, by Ken Palm definition, one of the worst, if not the worst, team in the NCAA tournament, who shouldn't have even been there because the real champion in their conference wasn't eligible, who played 2 nights prior in the first four, whose coach had talked trash about Purdue in the locker room, saying he thought they could beat them. It seemed like it was going to be a prime case for your classic 16v1 beatdown, and it wasn't. It was one of the greatest upsets in tournament history.
So Bean, can you lick my hand if he's already doing it. He didn't even have to hear the question. He knows that the Bellarmine rule is stupid. If you are a Division I basketball team and you win your conference tournament, you deserve to be in the NCAA tournament. The Bellarmine rule is stupid. So I agree 100% with Matt, and also so does our Twitter pool, because they also voted 100% yes that this is the biggest upset of all time. I'm also going to add the fact that the 23.5 points Purdue is favored by is the highest margin in an opening round upset. And I'm going to be completely honest. And there is a certain individual that may or may not listen to this podcast that is probably going to hate me for saying this, but I was never high on Purdue to begin with. And my money bracket, I actually had Purdue losing in the second round to Memphis. And one of the biggest things that plagued Purdue all year round is, look, we know Edey can score in the post, but they don't have that perimeter bucket getter. Fletcher Lawyer, Braden Smith have shown flashes at times, but nothing consistent. So that's plagued Purdue all year long, and FDU exposed the hell out of it. So that's all I got to say about that. You ready to move on to the second narrative?
I said it.
Let's hit it. Despite the blowout loss to UConn, Arkansas caught social media by surprise in their first 2 wins, the second win coming over 1 seed Kansas. Why were people surprised about Arkansas?
They were just hurt. I mean, we had seen all year that Arkansas was one of those teams we were always high on, but due to injuries to Brazil, due to injuries to Smith, due to injuries to Black, due to injuries to whoever, they just couldn't get together. And there's another thing too about Nebraska, Arkansas that I don't think a lot of people are taking into account, which is this team, as talented as they were, was comprised of transfers and freshmen. Ricky Council, the Mitchell brothers, all these dudes, Anthony Black, all freshmen and transfers. When your main core is going to be all talented transfers and freshmen, it's going to take a while to hit that gel. And to me, Arkansas was like a lot like some of those Kentucky teams we had seen over the past couple of years, where they would kind of underachieve a bit. And the next thing you know, Aaron Harrison's in the Elite Eight.
Mm-hmm.
A team that was coming together probably at the right time. But when you have that much talent and that much ego, it's going to be hard to manage. You throw in some injuries in a good conference like the SEC, where Alabama's dominant, Kentucky's always good, and people were seemingly falling in love with Auburn and Vanderbilt going down the line. It's easy to get distracted by the wayside when your star players are hurt. But what we all slept on, I think, was Eric Musselman. He coaches to win. I mean, that seems silly to say, but he has the right amount of talent. He has the right amount of guys with good instinct in there. That when the time comes to win, he gets into the Sweet 16. Every year he's gotten into the Sweet 16 at least. Now the problem was they ran into a more complete team, I think, in UConn. UConn, a team we were kind of wishy-washy about earlier in the year, but they did the
We'll get
one
to
thing
that.
we
But
did.
we'll
They
get to
did the
that.
one thing that we they did the one thing we needed to do to
Mhm.
make that team even better, and that's just what happened. They played a well-rested UConn team who really had just blown everybody out. They were down to Iona and then blew them out in the second half. Second round game didn't even happen against St. Mary's, and Arkansas had to play their tails off to beat Illinois, a very tough, very physical team who, like them, was struggling to put it together, and then beat Kansas, number one overall seed, who a lot of people thought was a viable candidate to be the first repeat champion since Florida. So I think the problem with Arkansas is it just takes time for freshmen and transfers to meld the way they do. And when you have injuries compounding that, it's easy to just forget. The team doesn't really have an identity. And then come March, they start playing together as a team. They start playing better. Ricky Council decides he's going to ascend a little bit. And the next thing you know, they're beating Kansas in around the 32. So that's my explanation is there was just so many moving parts that you forget where to look.
The only thing I'm going to add to that is that I want to start by saying in our college basketball cap or no cap episode, I capped the idea that Kansas would repeat, but people, I guess I just don't watch basketball. But anyways, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Arkansas has all the talent in the world. They were just injured. And the only thing I'm going to add to this now is I would have loved to have seen a fully healthy Arkansas team this season.
Oh yeah.
I wish Brazil would have never gotten injured for the entire season. I wish Nick Smith would have been more healthy throughout the course of the year and so on, because that team would have been absolutely insane to watch. But
Showtime.
anyways, on to the third narrative. And Matt, I feel like you're going to have a lot to say about this one. The
Yes.
Big Ten and SEC are getting a lot of flack for having 8 teams in the tournament, but none made it to the Elite Eight. Is it time to admit they are overrated?
The Big Ten, yes. I mean, we've been over this since 2002, it feels like. The Big Ten, Les, I'm going to say the one Big Ten team that always makes it the furthest, always does the best, is Michigan State. And why is that?
Tom
And
Izzo?
Michigan when they get in. Yes, Tom Izzo's part of it. It's the mindset, Les. And my thing is the Big Ten can basically be the biggest problem with the Big Ten is that you can't please the entire fan base of your squad. The way Tom Izzo does it is he will go in, he will get high profile recruits, he will get them and high profile transfers with good offensive games. He will get them together. He will make them play very tough teams like Kentucky, like Kansas, like North Carolina in their non conference schedule. He will then the Big Ten season happens, and Michigan State is always good in the Big Ten. They're never terrible, but they don't come at it. They don't change their style of play that much. to contend for the Big Ten championship. They play their own unique brand of basketball. And sometimes it wins, sometimes it loses. Tom Izzo doesn't care. Because you know when Tom Izzo wins, what does the meme go? January, February, Izzo. Because his teams are put together by standards the Big Ten doesn't usually abide by and doesn't really care about what they do in the Big Ten regular seasons. They're not sacrificing their bodies every night like Zach Edey and Trace Jackson Davis were doing. They invest in shooting. They invest in young talent, which are things that most Big Ten schools do not do, that they win in the NCAA tournament. And the problem with that is, if that happened at a school like Indiana, because of the way they think, or a school like Wisconsin, or a school like Purdue, because of the way those fan bases think, and they weren't in the Big Ten race for the championship, their fan base would be irate because they want the Big Ten championship instead of the NCAA championship. And you can't have it both ways in this day and age, where you're playing 30 games a year, where you're playing with the transfer portal, where you're playing with the highest level of parity that we've seen in college sports in a long time. You can't have it both ways. You can't. And so you pick your poison. You could be a Tom Izzo or a Juwan Howard and go out there, and Juwan Howard's the other Big Ten coach I see doing this. Shrewsbury could have done this, but now he's at Notre Dame. That's a story for another time. Those two guys, Howard and Izzo, will go out and get high-profile dudes who can shoot, who can play, who don't really play the typical Big Ten style, and look at what those two schools have done. Look what they've done. They've made it to the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight. Michigan's been to a championship game because of the way they do things. They handle it differently. These Big Ten schools who aren't, because of like the way Bo Ryan and Gene Cady and Bob Knight did it, where they just absolutely mug the hell out of each other for 3 straight months, it doesn't pay off because your guys are tired. You don't invest in the modern basketball winning position, the positions to win in modern basketball, and you get refs that are actually going to call fouls every once in a while. And it just never works out in March. So you have to pick your poison. You just pick, do you want to contend for a Big Ten championship or do you want to contend for the Natty? And there are some fan bases, sad to say, where it just makes more sense to them to contend for the Big Ten. And that's what they pick. And to show that they've learned absolutely nothing. I mentioned earlier in this rant that Micah Shrewsbury had gone to Notre Dame. To replace him at Penn State, they've hired the head coach of VCU, noted offensive juggernaut team, VCU. It just goes to show that the Big Ten has not learned their lesson from the previous 20 March Madnesses, that this style of play where you just mug and beat and pull yourself up by the bootstraps just doesn't pay off in March. And you're basically banking your entire season on how well you do on a Thursday night in Nebraska, and it's absolutely ridiculous to do that. SEC, I'm not going to be too hard on because it was just a weak bubble this year. We didn't have the kind of mid-major intensity that we've had in previous years. There wasn't a Monmouth. There wasn't a team where we were all upset they weren't going to get in. We didn't have any upset champions in the conference tournament. So somebody's got to fill the void. I've got no problem with Auburn being in the tournament. I've got no problem with half the teams in the SEC being in the tournament. They were good enough. But the Big Ten, it's just frustrating watching them do the same thing over again. They run into a brick wall for 3 months, and then they just fall off the cliff when March happens because they start to play styles of basketball that they just aren't used to, and they can't adapt because that's just how they play. Big, physical, dumb, Hoosiers 1987 style basketball. I'm surprised they acknowledge the 3-point line.
So we are a social media and sports podcast, and my take is similar, but just a hair different than yours. And I wanted to use this analogy so bad. This analogy that I've seen on social media so many times. The Big Ten basketball is like Android users that won't switch to iPhone. And I know the irony of that statement because I have an Android, but like basketball has evolved so much in recent years, and the Big Ten still looks like it's playing 2000s basketball with the 2 big guys in the middle and yada yada yada. Not a lot of modern offenses. Greg Doyle of the Indy Star wrote an article about IU adapting to the times. But my thing is the Big Ten as a whole needs to adapt to the times. A Big Ten team hasn't won the NCAA tournament since 2000, and that was Michigan State, as you alluded to. And unless they adapt to the times, it'll be another 2,000 years before they win one again. The SEC, I do get a little more of a pass, though, because I feel like this is just one of those fluke tournaments. But they've been very talented in recent years. And I mean, hell, the SEC has the last repeat champion. So not going to be too hard.
Spots. We've got 68 spots. You got to put somebody.
Yeah, I'm not going to be tough on the SEC, but the Big Ten, we are constantly complaining that they will not adapt to the times, and they continue to not do so. So, yes, definitely going to be hard on the Big Ten, and that's why they are that person who has an Android that will not change to iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, now to the fourth narrative. This is the first time that no number 1 seeds made the Elite Eight, and this is the first time that no 1, 2, or 3 seeds made the Final Four. What do you think of this?
I mean, it's great. I mean, we have to address the obvious elephant in the room, which is that to a casual fan, this Final Four is not going to be intriguing. To the CBS executives, they're going to be sweating this whole week out because it's not the big sexy names. But all I heard, unless I will admit that even my take on this may be a little bit biased, is everyone's going to get killed by the transfer portal. NIL is the death of sports, yada yada. But NIL is the reason why Miami's even here, and Miami's not a traditional basketball power. Transfer portal isn't the reason why San Diego State and FAU are here, or even UConn. UConn's just a well put together team. Those guys, you can't tell me right now at this moment that those two things are killing college sports. In 5 years, maybe it'll become like that upper echelon we've all been afraid of, where like the Kentuckys, the North Carolinas, the Dukes can pay for everybody and get all the recruits, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, in this in-between time, this wild time, the next 5 to 7 years, we're just going to have like the most random things happening because of the transfer portal and because of NIL money. And I think that's great because these few years are going to be the most parity-filled years of college basketball I think we've seen in a long time. And I'm very excited for that. And this year is just proving that to me. Now, like I said, the thing about upsets are the further along you get, the less interesting they become to a lot of people. But to me, I mean, it's just fascinating that we have 3 traditional non-powers. In fact, one team in like their first NCAA appearance or second all time running all the way here. And the even weirder thing about them, Les, is that none of them are actually really, truly Cinderellas. If we look at the last AP poll, UConn was 10th, Miami was 16th, Florida Atlantic was like 23rd, and you've got San Diego State, who was also fairly highly ranked. I want to say they were in like the 18 range. So you've got 4 teams that were ranked in the top 25. They're just not teams you think about as being ranked in the top 25.
They're not the brand names.
Yes, these are not fluke teams. These are good teams who caught excellent breaks, who played extremely hard, who are just happy to be here. And I'm happy they're there too, because it shows that after last year's Final Four of Duke, UNC, Villanova, and Kansas, that the parity's still there. The fun of March is still there. It's not going to become it's not going to become socialized overnight. There aren't going to be tears overnight. There's going to be a lot of movement that's going to make this a lot of fun for the next few years.
Well, I think it's very fitting because the year we had, no one has stood out. It's only right that we've had this level of chaos in the tournament. But look at the teams that had the opportunity to go to the Final Four. Look at who's in the Final Four.
Yep.
In a wide open year. I'm going to be completely honest. They talk about NIL transfer portal ruining college basketball, but this is the reason it's happening. Because, like you said, this is adding to the level of parity. Because with the NIL, with transfer portal, there are so many moving pieces that there is more parity now than ever in college basketball. And I'm going to pretend that I'm going to entertain the idea that the NIL is only going to benefit the traditional powers of college basketball. Clearly, that hasn't stopped you all from watching college football.
No.
Look who is winning the title or in contention for winning the title literally every year. I mean, this year it was cool to have TCU, but then they got smacked in the title game. So, so the thing is, these people that are making these statements have no idea what they're talking about. They've already been seeing it, and they still love it. So for them to complain about it is just hypocritical. But anyways, like you said, NIL, Nigel Pack doesn't go to Miami without NIL. Case in point, it's
Wong
adding
doesn't
more parity. Do what?
Wong doesn't stay
Wong
without
doesn't say, yeah, Isaiah Wong, who you predicted would win ACC Player of the Year, had to shout you out real quick. But yeah, so yeah, it's overall it's very fitting, just given the year we had, and it's just another example of why NIL, like we've said in our college basketball cap or no cap, is not ruining college basketball.
Yep.
And for our last narrative, before we get to one of our final segments of the day, social media seems to think UConn is the clear favorites. What do you think?
I would agree. I would agree going into it from a distance right now, the Monday before the championship. UConn to me does seem like the best team. They've absolutely dominated everyone they've played. They've blown them out. They made Gonzaga look like an AAU team out there. I mean, I really love what Hurley's doing at UConn. They've got more big men than any team I've ever seen. I love Adam Sanogo. Just he's been one of my favorite players to watch this whole tournament, and his attitude and love for the game are just infectious. And they did the one thing, Les, that we criticized them for going through earlier. We liked them earlier, but what was the one thing we said? They needed outside shooting. Hello, Mr. Hawkins. Now they've got outside shooting. What? We said that. You know we said that.
That's not what I said. That's not what I said.
What did you say? I remember us talking about shooting.
I said they needed a lot very similar to what about Purdue. I said they needed a perimeter bucket getter, a guy that can just ISO and get his own bucket. That's what I said about him.
Well, they got a guy to do that. They've got a couple guys. I can't ever pronounce his name correctly because I have to look it up. I have to look it up to make sure I get it. Because I'm really bad with names all of a sudden. But I mean, they've got a guy. They've got Hawkins, and I'm trying to. What is that guy's name? But anyway,
you're not talking about Andre Jackson, are you?
No, I'm talking about Andre Jackson's one of them. Yes.
Not Trey Newton.
No, not Trey Newton. They've got this other guy, Calcaterra. There we go. Calcaterra.
Yeah,
right?
he's a shooter. Yeah, he's a shooter.
He's a good shot. He's developing. Joey Calcaterra is developing that shot. I don't know why it took me so long to think of that. They've got great big men. And I think this is one of those weird times where being there before, even if it wasn't this exact, team, it's going to make a slight difference. It's going to make a slight difference because you know how to manage the Final Four. You don't have the whole, oh man, our school's never won anything before. We got a lot of pressure on our shoulders to win the championship type thing. This will be UConn's 5th title since 1999. That's pretty impressive. They're approaching blue blood status in my mind.
They should be blue blood, honestly. They should be a blue blood, honestly.
And I mean, they're there, but this will definitely cement them in the tier. And I mean, they did the one thing that we thought they couldn't do, which is they got some shooting. They've got shooting from the perimeter now. They've blown everybody out by 30 points. I can't see how they're not the favorite. But I will say, they've definitely got the tougher matchup with Miami now because what we're not talking about with Miami is they've played the highest seed each round they've been. They had Drake who had them down. It looked like Drake was going to beat them in the first round. Then they play Indiana. Then they play Houston. Then they play Then they played Texas. So they played the four best teams they could have played to get to this point. So I'm not going to discount them either. But in my mind, I'm going with UConn every time.
So I'm going to quote, like you said in our earlier episode, I like UConn. I'm hesitant to love UConn. And that's how I felt about them all season. I even had them losing to Iona in my money bracket as one of my predicted upsets. And they're making me look dumber and dumber each game. I worried about them in close games because I don't know how comfortable I am with Danny Hurley's play calling in close games. And then B, I don't know who their bucket getter is. Jordan Hawkins, Calcaterra, Trey Newton, they're all shooters, but can they put the ball on the floor and get a bucket when need be? I don't know. I haven't seen it. But to their credit, they haven't been in a close game. It's all been blowouts. So they've all dominated and they're playing great team basketball. I got no hate for them and all credit to them. But now as we approach 10 minutes to go, before Matt gets into his top 5 breakthrough players of the tournament, It is the time for the annual March Madness Hooper Award, which I'm going to stick with this common theme that we name awards. And we're going to name it after Carson Edwards, the guy who was the first award winner on this podcast. And the criteria is just a guy that's entertained me that doesn't play for Duke or Texas. And of course, it's got to be no other than Marquise Noel, a guy I feel like Matt's going to talk about here very shortly. So congrats to you for whatever that's worth. Matt, take it away, buddy. You got 8 minutes.
All right. My top 5 guys, breakout stars for the 2023 NCAA Tournament, otherwise subtitled Guys Matt saw play in high school, because that's really how it is. Because I'm going to start with Nigel Pack of Miami. Of course, guy went to Lawrence North, very good, or Lawrence Central, very good basketball player up there. Watched him play a few times. Was supposed to go to Purdue by all accounts early on in his transfer strategy, but then Miami rolled up with a dump truck full of money, otherwise known as NIL, and that changed the course of basketball history. I'm just so happy for him. He hit a shot over the backboard that should have counted for 4 points instead of being waved off the board. It was beautiful against Texas. I'm also just happy for Jim Larinaga because he's just a happy old man. I love Jim Larinaga. Number 4, John L. Davis of FAU, another guy I saw play at high school, Gary 21st Century, the Cougars. Just an absolutely amazing guy to point guard to watch. And I mean, I could easily say the same thing about his center, Vlad Golden. I've absolutely enjoyed watching FAU play. If we had done a show on Selection Sunday less, I was actually picking FAU to beat Purdue in the second round because of the fact they have a 7-footer they could throw at Edey and a lot of shot creating guards. It's going to be real interesting to see if Dusty May stays at FAU after this weekend. All right, moving on now to number 3. I'm going to go with Adama Sanogo. I feel like a lot of people knew him before, but I feel like he's just had a breakout tournament with his infectious attitude and the way UConn's played. Forward center with a lot of upside. He reminds me of the classic UConn big man, only he's better, I think, than Hashim Thabit could ever dream to be. And of course, at number 2, I'm going to go with the lost narrative from this NCAA tournament because, Les, believe it or not, on day 1 of the tournament, a Final Four favorite who everyone was absolutely obsessed with went down in the form of the Arizona Wildcats to the Princeton Tigers. And yes, I know people forgot about Princeton in the midst of this entire chaotic thing that had happened. And plus, let's be honest, Les, Princeton, not really the most embraceable underdog, considering they're all going to own us when they graduate from their basketball careers. So it's hard for exactly to wrap your arms around 15 seed Princeton for that reason. But we do love them. We love the way they played, and we really were excited to see Tosan Evans-Baldwin, their great forward, great scorer, great player, absolutely made the all South region team. Very good player. Very happy for the Princeton Tigers after the death of Pete Carroll, not that Pete Carroll, their longtime basketball coach. It was really cathartic to see them get all the way to the Elite 8 or Sweet 16 in Louisville. And finally, you know what's coming. It's Marquise Noel of Kansas State. I thought we were watching another Kemba Walker type run, but instead he got cut a little short. Still had a hell of a run in the tournament, set the assist record. Just a beautiful, beautiful group of games. And let's not forget that entire Kansas State roster was full of great stories from Keontae Johnson, who by all accounts shouldn't have been there because he should be dead. I'm not going to lie, with what he went through at Florida, collapsing on the court like that, coming back and leading a team picked 10th in the Big 12 with a first-year coach in Jerome Tang, all the way to the Elite 8 is nothing to shake a stick at all. That's just amazing. With Marquise Noel, he made that engine go. I would love to have seen him play into this weekend, but I got to be honest, I've been big on FAU all year, so I'll allow it. But man, it was just a great game between those two. And of course, the Michigan State Kansas State game was an instant classic. And I'm going to give a special shout out, Les, to somebody I know you hold near and dear to your heart, and that's Rodney Terry, the head coach of the Texas Longhorns, who's just been announced as he's sticking around. He got the full-term deal. Del Conte did the right thing. The way he took over this team in the middle of a horrible PR situation with so many egos, with so many transfers in the toughest conference in basketball, and brought them together. And I mean, for a while, just looked like absolute world beaters until they eventually just kind of ran out of gas and got a little bit of help from above against Miami, if you know what I'm saying.
Hmm.
That really ended that run. But that run was just great for him. I'm glad Texas did the right thing and didn't hold, only making the Elite Eight in his first year as an interim coach against him, and he's sticking around. That just makes me so happy. So shout out to Rodney Terry, my top five breakout performers. They got to, I'm got to go with Nigel Pack, John L. Davis, Adam Asanogo, Princeton really as a whole, and Marquise Noel. I mean, just great stories from this tournament all around, stuff that makes me very happy. Unless, you know what the amazing thing about all of this stuff we've talked about is
We got
we
another
could
weekend of basketball.
we got another weekend of basketball, and we could make another show today just from all the names that have hit the transfer portal to make us amped up for next year's tournament. Caleb
Hmm.
Love, just before we got on, he entered the transfer portal. Severe Wheeler, very good, often hurt point guard, in the transfer portal. Graham Ike of Wyoming in the transfer portal.
Kalel Ware.
In the transfer portal. Does Dana Altman stick around? Where's Dusty May gonna go? I mean, this is gonna be one of the wildest off seasons, if you could even call it that, because we're getting to that point now in college basketball we've seen in a long time, and it's just gonna be exciting to see where all these moving parts end up. And this tournament's been the perfect encapsulation of where I think NCAA basketball is going to be the next 5 to 7 years, which is just absolutely messy, chaotic fun.
And before I completely end the show, I do want to say one last thing. With Tech, when it comes to Texas basketball, we can't even say the hold the Elite Eight against him because Texas hasn't been to the Elite Eight in 15 years. So that's already a win. Not to mention, I'm sure those who follow me on Twitter, I was 1,000% serious. If Texas did not hire Rodney Terry as their next head coach, full-time head coach, I was going to drop them as a fan. I was not going to support Texas basketball. Yeah, I was not going to do it. Like everything Matt said, Rodney Terry stepped into one of the most toughest positions you can as a head coach, and he effing delivered. I caught myself. I was almost said a swear. I caught myself. But anyways, that concludes the episode that we have for today. As always, tell us in the comment section what you liked, what you didn't like. Be sure to follow the social media pages on Facebook and Twitter. And without further ado, Matt and I are out.
Hootie
Oh, and Bean.
hoo. Get down, Bean. Get down with it. He's doing the FDU fight song. He just doesn't know it. Is Bean gonna enter the transfer portal? Is he gonna leave us?
You better not. That's
He
enough.
licked. He licked you. That's a betrayer's kiss. Uh oh.